So I'll talk through some of the options on this, and I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of risk management strategy or the outcomes of risk management strategy. You can accept risks, you can avoid risks, you can mitigate risks, you can transfer risks. And there's a similar approach towards optimizing business functions. At the highest end, you can build it yourself, and it's going to cost you the most to implement it. It's going to cost you the most to operate it and maintain it. You're the only one that can make improvements to it. It's only going to be an engine that's driven by your investment, but it's going to most closely align to your optimal solution. It'll best meet your requirements because you've paid, you've invested to have it built to your requirements. And that might be spinning up a full in-house team with management and production and delivery staff. It might be creating a whole new product or custom manufacturing, or even your own custom software solution if we're talking from an IT perspective. Again, that's the most expensive option, and it's not just the upfront cost, it's the maintenance and operating cost of that solution, because it's only ever going to be as good as what you've directly invested into it, and it only keeps going as long as you keep investing into it. So you've got to consider carefully on the things that you choose to go that direction on. Those are your core value proposition drivers. In the middle, you could choose to buy a framework or a platform or a service or a starter and customize it. Now, that'll still cost you some additional effort to implement it, but it won't be quite as expensive to operate because you're able to leverage what's available at scale for what it does well. And then you're paying a bit more to make it your own. And whether that's a business process or a production team or manufacturing customization or a business software application, you aren't starting from scratch. You're buying into someone else's invested effort. You're getting an economy of scale for the things that you can get to that tier, and then you're adding the little bit extra that makes it unique to you and really drives your value proposition. And lastly, you could buy a standard product or a service that's good enough, and it meets the important parts of the need, and it does it at an economic price. And you might not have a lot of customization options for it. It might not do everything exactly the way that you'd like to have it done. It's good at the things it does do. And the economic price means that you freed up your capital and your attention and your efforts for things that have higher returns. Now, we all do this every day. On my own computer, I'm using Microsoft Outlook for my email. I subscribe to the off-the-shelf Microsoft Outlook product. I did not build a custom email software client. And I haven't paid anyone to customize it, and I haven't spent a significant amount of my attention to do so. It does the core of what I need to do. It lets me manage my email, it lets me manage my schedule, and I get to collaborate and coordinate with my team, and I do it very economically, but I kind of had to meet it halfway. Does it do everything for me and make coffee in the morning? No, it doesn't, but that's okay, because I'm getting what's appropriate for what I need for that tool. So let's go back to Jennifer's table and let's fill in some of the boxes. Now, your table might look a little different in this example, and that's fine, but here's a way to think about: should I buy it off the shelf? Should I build it? Or should I buy it and should I customize it? What do you get the most return upon? And as an easy example, if it's not part of your core value proposition and it's not unique to the way you operate, that's the XX on here, try to buy it off the shelf or subscribe to an existing service that's out there. You're not going to realize a significant return on any higher level of cost. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum, if it both supports your core value proposition and it's unique to you, you're likely going to have to build that one. That's going to require a lot of investment and effort. It'll take the most effort and it'll cost the most, but you'll get the best return on your effort because you're driving value that your customers then want you to be able to present to them. It's part of your core value proposition. They're the things your customers care about. There's a middle ground here where it's one or the other. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. You're probably looking for a solution you can buy or subscribe to, leverage outside, customize a little bit. You want to customize it to make it best meet your needs, but you're building on a foundation. You're starting with something other than scratch and then making it your own. And it doesn't require that extraordinary investment as if you were starting from ground zero and building the whole thing up. As you go through this type of exercise and you quantify the costs and the benefits, you might also realize that some of the things that you already have in place that you'd previously considered, this is unique to us, this is the only way to do it, might not actually merit a unique investment of cost or effort. And they could be actually accomplished equally well with something off the shelf or otherwise generally available. It's all a question of being purposeful about where you spend your time, money, and attention. And I'll turn it back over to Jennifer. And Jennifer, could you walk us through like an accounting functions example?
Absolutely. So, well, we went too far, didn't we? There we go.
Yeah, we both clicked. It's all good.
I couldn't speak to that next one. So when we kind of walk through accounting examples, right? I mean, this is really the things you kind of use to scale up, scale down, think through your system. And if you kind of look at this last one, right, the accounting software and tools, that directly relates really well to the slide Chad just went through where we talk about optimizing functions here, right? There's a reason that like some ridiculous percentage of closely held businesses use QuickBooks, right? It's this by standard space and doesn't do it. And then, next step's a ERP that's custom to your industry. Very few clients that size have a full build it model, and so that's kind of the concept here if you kind of apply it to accounting and software. But when we kind of walk through each section here, and what I want to do on each of these is kind of talk about how we typically see it work and how, some other factors around it. But if you look at invoicing and accounts receivable, right, that's a company specific, oftentimes part of a product and service delivery workflow. And so sometimes that happens in-house, sometimes it happens automatically. And it's something that you've maybe paid to automate or function. It's typically not something that's completely outsourced. But there's ways to make it more efficient and effective and scale up or scale down with that. Same thing with collections, right? We often see that collections are handled in-house, but usually once they hit a certain stage, then you might outsource to a lawyer or have them follow up on collections. Similar issue there, right? None of those are your core value proposition. Actually, I'd argue most of accounting's probably not. Maybe some of your very proprietary information is. Payments and accounts payable, right? Those you can outsource and automate a lot of different ways. Especially if a client has a purchase order process on the purchasing side, well, then if everything matches, it should just sail through. It's amazing the amount of time and effort are in procedures around a purchase that's already been approved for a set amount and a set price, and yet we still spend hours trying to get a payment out the door. And, those are areas where you can, a little time can go a long way, and it should be kind of a standardized function. And then you can also use software tools like Bill.com or things like that to take approval to payment processes much faster. If we talk about, purchasing and inventory, well, sometimes that's more of a internal core function because it requires knowledge of the product and service delivery the company's doing and what we need to buy to do that and what we need to carry, what we need to have on hand or not on hand. When we get into cash and banking, that can depend, and it can depend on your bank and the level of service and how things are handled. But, an easy example of that might be cash sweeps. A lot of times companies did that manually, didn't manage cash really well. As interest rates have gone up and returns have gone up, that's something you tend to want to streamline and automate. And a lot of that's just working with your bank. If your cash flow is really tight, sometimes you need to have that in house because you're going to manage it really tightly as far as when you pay things and when you handle things. When we get into payroll, that's one that almost rarely can I think of a client that should not outsource payroll. The key part of that you keep in house is approving the time, right? Whoever physically supervises someone should approve the hours they work. Other than that, there's not a lot of value added in the payroll function. It just needs to happen. And so that's a key area that you can streamline and outsource. There are some businesses like construction, things like that, where they have specific timekeeping requirements, but a lot of times technology or process planning or even certain payroll services can help with those things if you do a little more investigation. Month-end close, that's, yes, you got to get monthly reports done. Yes, you need that information to run your business. So it's important, but it's often not standard. And you can typically automate parts of that or have expertise that supports that. What is more important is the outcome of the month-end close, which is reporting and statements. And that's something where that's a little more customized to the business. And then if you get someone that really gives you some real examples and can help you make decisions based on that information, that has a lot more value. And one thing I was thinking of with the automation of the month-end close, we had a client several years ago that super smart, was a tax-only client. We didn't do any accounting work for him. And the tax group came to our accounting group and said, hey, their books are kind of messed up. They told us there's some issues. And so I got on the phone, and the client was like, well, I use QuickBooks and everything's automated. I have all the feeds turned on. As we did an investigation and questions, we found out she had never done a reconciliation. And so in her mind, and she didn't understand why she would ever have to, because the feeds were on. I go, but how do you know the feeds are working correctly? How do you know it didn't double transactions up or transactions are missing? You said the numbers don't make sense. That's probably why. And she was adamant that no, I have the feeds on, they work. And so, checks and balances on these processes can be a very good thing. So, and we did not convince her otherwise, but that was okay. When we get into reporting and statements and analysis and budgeting, that's where I said things should probably be unique to that business, what they need to run it, what their departments are, what their divisions look like. And all of that is tied where we go all the way back to the beginning to your core value proposition and what's unique to you and how do you manage it. Compliance under like taxes and controls. Most of the time people go to a third party to do their taxes. They don't keep up to speed on all the tax rules on their own to do that in-house. And, the routine functions around taxes, like maybe sales tax, those can stay internally, but you still want to automate that process through a system. You don't want to go back through every invoice you did and figure out, did I collect that money or not? And then we talked a little bit about software and tools and how, that's a very big thing. Some best practices in that we see right now too is you definitely have your software be cloud-based. I mean, I think a lot of people learned a lot of things during COVID and remote access and how to handle those things, but it makes it easier to outsource certain functions too, because it's accessible anywhere. Not that we don't know a group that could help you figure out how to access your on-prem from anywhere, but it is generally a best practice. And then, just thinking how that kind of drills into all the above. When you say, hey, I don't want to spend extra time on this task, how do I think of an ERP that helps me automate the processes of kind of above the line? And do I get return on that investment? We had a client, this was several years ago, that had a customized workflow they did specialized engraving on things. So they had a workflow that basically when someone typed in what they wanted engraved on a web order, it would print it, which was great, right? No typos, no things like that. So then they wanted to buy an ERP to align all the way through until the product shipped, the invoice goes out the door and collect. So they did interviews, they did a process. This was a $10 million business. They were going to spend $450,000 on an ERP just out of the gate, not maintenance. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me, because you guys, even the efficiencies you find in that are not going to drive the return on that investment. So they're still on QuickBooks, and they for that same reason. So and on that's probably a good segue to Chad for some better IT examples than just accounting related software.
Before I jump into the IT examples, I saw from one of the audience members, there was a question on how do you identify the CVP, the core value proposition, especially if there's disagreement. And I messaged Brian and asked if Brian would step in and kind of talk through maybe how we've done that within Aldridge or what he's seen as far as techniques to reconcile.
We agree 100% of the time. What are you talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. No, I think this is one of those things where getting consensus among the leadership team can be tough, because the person in charge of finance may really want to outsource some of these functions, and someone else on the leadership team may think that it's something that's core to the business, and no, we can't let go of that. And so it's not an easy conversation, and I think it's just one of those things where whatever your executive leadership meeting cadence is and the way that you process issues, this is something where you got to really get together and make sure that you agree on what functions are going to be outsourced, what's not going to be outsourced. And I think going along with that is, how do we hold the outsourced partner accountable to deliver back to us the quality of product that we're really looking for? And so just like you would hold an internal employee accountable or a department accountable, just because you're outsourcing, you're not relinquishing all control there. And just identifying what are those success factors, what are the KPIs that outsourced provider needs to live up to. We run our business very closely to KPIs and measurements, and when we outsource something, we do the same way. I don't know, Jennifer, Chad, if you've got anything to add there.
Oh, I was going to ask Brian, do you have any sage insights on how we have navigated establishing our own core value proposition and what is in the box and what's outside the box. I think part of the question that I saw from the audience was, what if there's disagreement among the leadership team about what the core value proposition even is?
Yeah, that's something, and it's changed over time. I mean, at the core of what we do, we provide IT support and consulting to our clients. So outsourcing that core value proposition for us isn't something that we've really been interested in doing. But we understand with IT, we can't be experts in all things IT. There are a lot of applications that are out there. There's custom development that needs to happen. And so those things that are on the fringes, we've had to identify what are the things that 80% of our clients are going to buy. And if 80% of our clients are going to buy it, then yes, absolutely, we need to invest in it internally to make sure that we can deliver it. If it's a one-off project for some piece of development or something like that, then that may be something that we outsource. We bring in a third party to deliver that function to the client until we get to the point where we will deliver it to 80% of our clients. Security is one of those things where historically we've outsourced most of that, but as it's becoming more common, we've got plans to bring our SOC and SIM internally as we get that more adoption there across the client base.
Good answer. Jennifer, did you have anything to add to that?
I think you guys addressed it pretty well, actually. So.
All right, cool. You know what? I'm going to run through, much like Jennifer did, accounting functions. I'm going to run through IT functions. Just like accounting isn't accounting and you're done. IT isn't just one big monolithic thing labeled IT. This will probably be another good slide to capture, refer back to when you guys look at the recording. As you're thinking about what's strategic, I recognize that I come to this with a very IT technology business perspective on it. So you may not be thinking about all these different elements that actually go into managing your IT, but the reality is within all of your organizations, all these things are happening. And they could be happening accidentally. They could be happening purposefully. They could be happening haphazardly. They could be happening with a high level of maturity on it. So let me just call out a couple of examples that are in here, or a couple of things that stand out to me. Application development is one of those double check items. And I'm talking the applications which are assets. They're intellectual property of your business. They're not just the regular productivity software like Microsoft Office that you routinely subscribe to and install on every computer in your organization just to get your work done. These are the things that you've invested effort or cost to build or customize, especially those that support your core value proposition. In some businesses, this literally might mean that Microsoft Excel is not unique to you, but that set of spreadsheets that you've built for order and delivery management is. That is an application. You have invested time to create an order and delivery management system building on top of a platform like Microsoft Excel. Are you aware of where those assets are within your organization? Are there things that people are spending weeks of effort every year or months of effort to put together because they're hyper-focused, maybe even tunnel vision, on making that one thing perfect? But have you looked at the broader sphere about what's actually available that might be able to do it easier? Are you prepared to pay the ongoing maintenance cost of, wow, there's some specialized tribal knowledge to keep that application up and running? And if it breaks, there's no one to turn to because we custom built it. Similarly, you might have a modern ERP application, and you might have custom data management screens and back-end data structures and reporting and analytics and data interconnectivity built within the framework aligned to your business. That's another example of application development. And in that case, you've probably got an ERP software vendor that has built the ERP platform, and you've probably got support through them, so you're managing some of your risk. You're not having to pay for the full cost of building an ERP from scratch. And you probably have an ERP consultancy that you're working with that themselves, that's their core value proposition, is helping you leverage the most of your ERP so that you've actually got some managed cost and managed risk about, well, if we want to make further improvements for it, we don't have to figure it all out ourselves. We can outsource what's appropriate, but you're still able to bring the knowledge about what's important to your business into that conversation. So those customizations most closely align to what you need for outputs from it. Now, in each of those cases, you've decided that both the implementation and the operating costs and the maintenance costs, they're worth it for the value that drives your business. You're getting a return on investment. Some of you also might at this point be thinking of examples within your own business where you or someone within your business has spent a lot of effort to customize something. And now you're wondering, are you really getting a good return on that effort? Or are you potentially exposing yourself to risk and ongoing maintenance costs that, whoa, I didn't sign up for that? And maybe the cost has been high, or the actual revenue or the productivity gains are too low. Or maybe you're now just realizing that there's a carry cost to this that you were effectively taking on by default. And great, that's exactly what I want you to be thinking through. That if we're helping you look at what your back office functions are, and you're now able to look at it with that type of lens and say, wow, we're really taking on some risk here, or we're taking on some carry cost by doing this, perfect. Just having the conversation is the right first move. The answer might be yes, it's totally worth it, but that's fine as long as it's a cognizant answer, not a by default answer. And something else that comes up with an IT is IT strategy. Now, implicitly, strategy means ensuring that your technology is contributing to or supporting your business's core value proposition. And that doesn't mean that you have to build a complete IT strategy from scratch, though. There are resources you can leverage and that you can build upon. And it'll still take effort, and you can decide based on how much you anticipate technology contributes to your business value, what parts of your IT strategy require a no compromise custom investment, and what parts can achieve appropriate results at a shared value implementation and operating cost. Again, your table might look different than this one, and that's perfectly fine. This is all about considering and supporting the decisions that are right for your specific business. Now, one more table. IT security functions. Well, there you go. Now I've got a security subset of the IT subset of the back office business functions that we're talking about. Security gets a lot of attention today, or it should, so it often requires its own consideration. And now this table's filled out for an organization that's probably in a regulated industry of some type. Maybe they're in healthcare, maybe they're in financial services, and they have compliance requirements. And modern compliance often requires maintaining a solid information security posture. And information security postures aren't just documents, they're culture, their leadership, their training, their awareness, their controls, their reviews. So in this example, this organization would probably elect to use off-the-shelf services and subscriptions for things like network security, endpoint security, threat monitoring, security awareness training. They know they need these things. They're an important part of their risk management, but they don't have to create these things custom. They can leverage those things because they aren't unique to what that business does. But this organization would probably also choose to invest a larger amount of its cost and efforts and attention into its information security posture, including its compliance and its regulatory posture and its access management, and being prepared to respond appropriately to potential security events. Now, if this feels like a lot of detail, and you're thinking that most of these top-level business functions could be broken down into varying levels of granularity like this, well, you're right. It's not wrong. Sometimes, depending on where you prioritize your costs, or where you identify your potential risks, it makes sense to drill down this far. And that by itself is one of the cost benefit questions that you'll need to consider. But it's also one of the evaluations that you could purchase. You can subscribe to services. You can use resources online. You can bring in consulting groups that specialize in driving down to this level of detail and helping you make those informed decisions with your management team. It includes expertise. That's one of the things that you can buy.